Hello and welcome to today's Advocacy in Action webinar. Before we begin, we'd like to remind you that registration is now open for PHADA's 2026 Legislative Forum, September 13th through the 15th in Washington, D.C. Hotel rooms are going quickly, and we encourage you to register today. A few logistics before we get started. All links and resources for the webinar can be found in the resources document now linked in the chat. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. At any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A box in the toolbar to submit your questions. We ask that you not use the chat, as this will not be monitored for audience questions. This webinar will be re-recorded and be available on our website next week. Finally, as a reminder, the discussions in this webinar are not for media use. For quotes and more information, please contact PHADA directly. It is now my pleasure to introduce Crystal Wojciechowski, Executive Director of PHADA.
Thank you, Sarah. So welcome to today's webinar on Advocacy in Action, Building Relationships that Deliver Results. So just a little background on this webinar, as we really heard over the last few months some member feedback about hearing from your peers on what's really working in advocacy, both at the local level and in DC. And so today we're going to discuss with our speakers, our guests, tips and tricks on successful advocacy, not just when you walk into a congressional office, either locally or in DC, but those relationships that you build over time. So today we'll talk about how to strengthen your advocacy efforts by building meaningful relationships and really utilizing your local experiences into powerful advocacy tools. So I did just want to quickly thank our speakers. We are so excited that you have joined us today. I will ask that you go ahead and turn on your cameras. First, we have Katie Jo Armbrust from Grand Forks Housing Authority in North Dakota. We have Martell Armstrong from the Housing Authority of Elgin, Illinois. Mark Gillett, Oklahoma City Housing Authority. And also we have our PHADA policy team, Michael Webb, Julie Piccolo, and David Weber. So they're going to get into some really great Q&A about planning successful meetings and also offer some practical guidance for how you can champion funding and regulatory support that your agency needs so that you can serve your residents more effectively. So before I hand it over to Julie to talk a little bit more about relationship building and your advocacy, I did just want to put a plug for our next webinar, which we really view as a follow-up to this webinar, which is in August, in the afternoon of August 25th. So more details about that specific time, but that webinar will cover office hours and state connections. So you'll have an opportunity to connect more with your peers and have some discussions about what you can do preparing for the legislative forum later in September. So Julie, without further ado, I will pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Before we hear from our panelists, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why advocacy matters and why each of you is uniquely positioned to be an effective advocate for your agency. So if you're joining us today, it may be because advocacy isn't something that you do every day, or you may think of it as something that's reserved, just for lobbyists or for those moments when Congress is considering, major legislation or funding decisions. But the reality is that advocacy isn't just about asking for something. It's about helping policymakers understand the real world impact of the decisions that they make. And no one is better equipped to tell that story than you. So every conversation that you have with an elected official, whether it's at the national level or whether it's locally or their staffer, is an opportunity to explain what your housing authority does, demonstrate the impact of your programs, and help connect federal policy to the people in the communities that you serve. So whether you're meeting your members of Congress or staff here in Washington, D.C., or back home in your district, or both, you bring a perspective to the conversation that no report or briefing memo or fact sheet can really fully capture. You administer these programs every day. You see where policies are working, where challenges exist, and how decisions affect families children, seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities in your own community. For some of you, these meetings may feel unfamiliar, especially if you're new to advocacy. And if that's the case, then today's conversation is really designed with that in mind. So as a reminder, we'll be sharing several advocacy resources, including PHADA's Advocacy Quick Guide, covering everything from preparing for congressional meetings like, you should be scheduling those meetings 2 to 4 weeks in advance. I will say if you're in DC and you're planning on meeting at the congressional offices, you want to allow plenty of time to navigate those buildings from personal experience. That you really want to anticipate that the meetings will last about 20 to 30 minutes. You're bringing a simple one pager and you're following up after the meeting. The issue resource, there's also some issue resources that PHADA has developed that you could take with you or refer to before your meetings. There's an FY27 appropriations position paper. There's a position paper on the OMB rule, BABA, whatever's top of mind. So for your own advocacy, there's 3 kind of overarching things to keep in mind that our panelists are going to share their specific examples on. So first, know what matters to your agency. You don't have to cover every single issue in every single meeting. You do want to be clear about your top priorities to help the conversations be focused. Second, be ready to tell your local story. Data and funding numbers are super important, but really what often resonates are the examples that illustrate how affordable housing challenges are in your community. And your experiences really help put that human face on your policy. So I don't know about you, but I can remember some of the things about some of the programs I ran, but honestly, it's really the people that stick with me and their experiences. And that's going to be true when you share that as well. And finally, remember that advocacy is really about the relationships. The strongest partnerships with congressional offices really aren't just built in a single meeting. They're built over time through regular communication, responsiveness, and a willingness to serve as a local resource when housing issues arise. So those 3 ideas, the knowing your priorities, the sharing your story, and the building relationships help provide a foundation, but they look different for every housing authority. And that's exactly why we're so pleased to have today's panel. So our panelists have each taken different paths to become effective advocates. They'll talk about what it was like when they first started, how they developed relationships with congressional offices and local offices, what challenges they've encountered, and how they've made advocacy a regular part of their already very demanding jobs. I think that you'll find their experiences are really practical and honest and relatable. That's our goal. So whether you've been doing this for years or are preparing for your very first meeting, it gives you a chance to hear firsthand how some of those things roll. So to get to know a little bit about who's on the call and the communities you're in, we have 2 quick and easy polls that we'll be sharing with you in a moment. One is just the type of area, what type of area is your housing authority located in? Rural, suburban, small town, urban? Just take a second to fill that out. And which category best describes your housing authority size? So we'll give it a couple seconds.
Julie, we're still getting several more responses, so I'll just give it.
All right, we can listen. We're good. Everybody. We're happy to hear from you. You should definitely fill in the poll. Who am I to rush? You can't rush a good thing.
Nope. Okay, perfect. Let me end poll and share the results.
Oh, so this is really great to see everybody. So it looks like we have a real mix of housing authorities who are joining us here today. So that's really exciting because our panelists also bring a real range of location and size. So I think that this will be a webinar that has something for everyone. So was there anything more for that, Sarah, or are we good?
No, all set.
All righty. So as a reminder, we'll have time at the end for Q&A with the experts on our panel. And with that, I would say let's get started. So I'd like to begin by asking each of our panelists, starting with Katie Jo, to briefly introduce themselves and discuss how they got started with advocacy. Maybe what did it look like in the beginning?
Thank you so much, Julie. Yes, my name is Katie Jo, and I am very excited to be here today. I actually had zero interest in housing or advocacy when I first started. My internship was here at the Grand Forks Housing Authority in 2010, and I tried to get out of it. And then I quickly realized just how important housing was for a household's or a person's foundation for life. Um, and so it wasn't really until I started I was part of the development team for a project called The Grave on First. And that was kind of my first taste of advocacy. We needed city council approval on a variety of things and had to work with our city planning department. And from there, that involvement then grew to okay, so we have housing, but now we need services. So then learning about Medicaid and working with our state, and then ended up becoming working with our state legislature. And so I had done that for a handful of years. And then just a few years ago, I started doing congressional visits. I've actually, this will be my fourth conference this fall for the PHADA Legislative Forum. And it is so fun to get to tell the story of what you and your organization do and how their funding and policies impact your work.
Martell, did you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Julie. Martell Armstrong. I'm with the Housing Authority of Elgin. Elgin is a northwest suburb of Chicago, Illinois. I have been working in housing most of my adult life. I started as a housing specialist about 2.5 years out of college at the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority. Cincinnati is my hometown, and kind of rose up through the ranks. Eventually moved from Cincinnati and went to Longview, Texas, which is a small town in eastern Texas, about 2 hours east of Dallas. And from there, I went to two housing authorities in Michigan, Inkster, Michigan, and Lansing, Michigan. And Inkster is more of an urban housing authority. It's right outside of Detroit. Lansing is more of small to medium-sized town. And from there, I came here. So with that being said, I was in terms of coming up in the housing world, I was always aware of the FADAs and the NAROs and their importance. I kind of always watched the various policies and regulations matriculate down through the various PIH notices and final rules and things like that. And, I've always paid attention to the commenting period on those final rules and kind of paid attention to how they're impacting, our operations specifically. As I kind of grew in my role in housing and began to oversee housing authorities, then of course, that kind of interest peaked with not only how is it affecting policies and, our internal policies and regulations, but how it is also affecting the local community. In Longview, Texas, the housing authority was a department of the city. So that enabled me to interact a lot with not only the city manager and assistant city manager, but also city council to advocate for a lot of policies. And I think my first experience with any congressional leadership was in Longview, and that came with advocating with Louis Gohmert. And Louis is a very colorful person, but he is also a very personable person. So I think we were able to kind of build bridges through kind of shared experiences and similarities in our upbringing. So with that being said, just my matriculation through, my growth in my career has led me, obviously, to advocating more on Capitol Hill as well.
Hi, my name is Mark Gillett, and I have the honor of being the executive director at the Oklahoma City Housing Authority. And then up till about 1 year ago, for the previous 2 years before that, I served as the president of the Public Housing Authority Directors Association. And so when I started in public housing 34 years ago, I was really told to not advocate, to keep your mouth shut, to stay out of the limelight, don't talk to the media, don't talk to any elected official. And when I became executive director about 11 years ago now, that started to bite us because we didn't have a good relationship, and so had to really develop an advocacy program, using PHADA as helping us know how to design position papers, how to get our story out there, and how to actually call a elected official or a staff person. And so that's my unique story, and then also the very unique story of how do you promote social programs in one of the reddest states in the United States. And so it's been an interesting challenge for us to get our story out there. We'll talk about that as we go along.
Thank you, everyone. And so I'm wondering for our second question, and just moving forward, if you could tell us about a relationship that you built through your advocacy work that took time to build, but then ultimately paid off in some tangible outcome for your agency. I'm wondering if we could start with Martell on that.
Yeah, I'll go back to Louis Gohmert. And, a lot of that was with the assistance of some of the local officials, and especially being a newcomer, so to speak, being an outsider from Longview, and that being such a small town, and, leveraging previous relationships that were already in place. And I think kind of going to some of his town hall meetings, which I'll also cover at a later question as well. But I think going to some of his town hall meetings helped to leverage that relationship. But with that being said, it definitely was growth there. In other words, his kind of bending his ear for us and taking time to listen to me specifically, did not happen overnight. There was an introduction, there was familiarity by kind of attending some of his, events and speaking engagements and town halls outside of DC. And, then he subsequently put me in touch with a lot of his staff. Sometimes that happens vice versa. But having already had his ear and having spent time going to some of his events and having some brokers, so to speak, all of that kind of happened over a length of time. But it did materialize into a great partnership overall.
Yeah, and if I could just have a point of moderator's privilege before we move on to Mark. Martell is being very underestimating when he says that Louis Gohmert was a colorful figure. Louis Gohmert's politics are somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. And so, I mean, I think to build a relationship with him is not the easiest thing in the world. But moving on, Mark, tell us about a relationship that took time to build but then paid off.
Thanks, Michael. So I had the opportunity to develop a relationship with Representative Tom Cole. Tom Cole, 3 years ago, was the chair of the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Committee at the House. And then now Representative Cole is the chair of Appropriations, the full funding committee at the House of Representatives. And so when Representative Cole became the THUD appropriations chair, I set as my goal to have a meeting with him. And so I went through the local office here in Oklahoma City, to find out how to schedule a meeting. And then they sent me to the DC office. And so I developed a good relationship with the staff here locally, and then also at DC. And I'll say here, the staff is by far the most important piece of the puzzle in getting to the representative or the senator, any elected official. And so I was able to set up a meeting with Representative Cole, and he didn't want to see the best of the best. He wanted to see typical public housing, which made those of us as Public Housing Authority staff a little nervous. But he came, he brought his staff with him, and we sat, and it was really great because we were set for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and he told us he didn't know very much about public housing, but he wanted to learn. And so it was our ability to fill him with all of the knowledge that we had, and so we were able to do that. And then as a THUD Appropriations Chair, Representative Cole went back to Washington and then asked through his staff if he could send the entire THUD staff to Oklahoma City to take a tour of the public housing developments here, and so we could train them. And so, sure, well, yeah, that's a great opportunity to get that out. And so the staff came. We had great discussions with them. We also went on tours with them. It was a fabulous opportunity to introduce public housing to the staff of the Appropriations Committee. And so that relationship, has been very good and very strong. And how did it pay off? Well, the last year that Cole was the chair of the THUD committee, the appropriations for housing did not drop as high a percentage as the appropriations had in the past. And so I like to think that he heard our story, he understood our story, and he recognized that public housing was an appropriate thing to fund in the budget. That's my story.
Thanks.
All right. So I'm very fortunate. North Dakota is clearly a small population state. And so we have the opportunity and access to our elected officials at a higher rate than some of our other counterparts across the country. Senator Hoeven is on the Senate THUD Appropriation Subcommittee, and it has been a work in progress getting him up to speed on a few things related to, some of our other congressional delegation had signed on to things like the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. And that took a hot minute for him to sign on to as a co-sponsor. And, it ended up being something that not only did I continue to bring up of like, hey, this is a good way to talk about housing and increase housing supply, something we all need, but also having our executive director from the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency, reiterate and provide additional support for him to be a co-sponsor on. So he eventually did do that. In addition, because, we've built this partnership, I've continued to be in DC, because while sometimes they might be able to ignore a phone call or an email, when you continue to show up in person, they can't run away from you. And we had asked a long time ago for some help on loan forgiveness, a weird situation that HUD had kind of had a misstep on. And he actually, long story short, included language because it took an act of Congress for this loan to be forgiven. And so he was able to do that in this Consolidated Appropriations Act 6. So between, continuing to educate, advocate, show up, we were able to have that substantial win. It was more than $2 million that affected one of our projects. And then one other thing he was super helpful with was previously, we had asked for support of the Continuum of Care grants being in a 2-year funding cycle. And in the fiscal year 24 appropriations, he supported that. So it would be fiscal year 24 and 25. And so this past year, when the administration decided to put out a no vote for 25, we were able to advocate and share all of that information with his staff. John Zimmermeyer is a gem and it was super helpful in helping us understand and advocate, what HUD was saying versus what they were telling us.
Yeah, I think those are really helpful examples of specific outcomes. But one of the questions is sometimes you may not have a specific ask, and so how do you maintain the relationships even in between those asks for specific action? Katie Jo, I think we're going to start with you. No, sorry, Mark. We're going to start with you.
All right. Thanks, David. So how do we keep in touch? In Oklahoma City, we have a bi-monthly newsletter, and that newsletter just kind of highlights what's going on, and we purposely send that to each of our elected officials and their staff, all the way from the local level all the way up to the national level. And so that's how we maintain that basic contact. More locally, at the city council level, I meet monthly with some of the city council folk just to address what's going on, concerns they might have, concerns I might have about the different housing properties and things that we need from them or they need from us. And then I think it's very important to develop a relationship with the mayor and with the city manager, if that's the setup in your community, so that you can email them just to let them know, X has happened, wanted you to know so that you don't get the call from the constituent without knowing about it. So it's very important to have that contact with them. And then at our state level, we have contracted with an advocate, an individual who actually spends their time at the state capitol promoting affordable housing in this case. And so that's a great way for the state legislator to remember that housing is an important fact and that we need their help. So that's how we do it.
And how about you, Katie Jo? How do you do it out in North Dakota?
So I know everybody talks about building relationships, which that is what you're doing, but I think of it as making friends because work is so much more fun when you get to do it with friends. So I make it a point to, provide them not only, updates and information, but offer to be a resource. And there are times when I might not know the answer, but I absolutely know who else knows the answer and ensure that I'm following up with them and providing that answer. But also, I think it's really important, like when you talk about, or when I say making friends, you don't have to agree with everything that they do or vote on in order to have a relationship and be able to find common ground. Like these days, housing is one of those more bipartisan things. But I would strongly recommend not making assumptions because you never know what new piece of information might provide them with enough justification to change their mind going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really important not to make assumptions about what people think. Martell, how about you? How do you keep your relationships going?
Yeah, just going back to some of the town hall meetings that I mentioned, just by virtue of having the relationship, and incidentally, my representative for the 8th Congressional District in Illinois is Raja Krishnamurthy, and I am sorry if I mispronounced his last name. Because of that, everyone locally just calls him Raj. His campaign slogans are Raj as well. So just by virtue of having that relationship, I get his newsletters and, get invited or at least notified of his speaking engagements and things like that. So, I go to those, I make sure I sign in that my name is there, my organization is there, my contact information is there. We do send newsletters and things like that, and other policy requests, not only to Raj, but to Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth as well. Locally, the relationship with our state senator and our state representative locally kind of seems like, that just happened by osmosis. But, since I've been in Elgin, we've had good relationships with both entities. And so then because of that, I get invited to things, to get access to um, Duckworth or Durbin, or in this case, Juliana Stratton, because she is the nominee for the Democratic nominee for the uh, senator to replace Dick Durbin. So just having those relationships and being able to leverage them. Also, just having a great relationship, or at least an active relationship with City Hall and things like that. And Elgin, actually, our housing authority, authority actually services the entire county and not just Elgin. Um, and so just having that relationship locally with City Hall, it's helped me leverage other relationships with, we call them downstream housing authorities, but we are basically right along the Fox River. So some of those municipalities that are south of us along the Fox River, we are building a light tech unit. And, there were a lot of questions, and that mayor called our mayor to just kind of get a background on us. And, we got a great recommendation. So that comes along with being able to leverage those relationships, but also having a good track record in our community.
Thank you for those examples. So I came from Rhode Island, so we'd see people at clam bakes. So you guys went into way better details. So I just want to follow up with another question. So what has been the biggest challenge for you related to advocacy, either kind of like overarching, or if you have a specific example, and what kind of strategies did you employ to overcome that challenge? And Katie Jo, I don't know if you want to kick that one off.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge was like my nervousness, the perception, that like elected officials are, sometimes intimidating or whatever. But what I've realized is all elected officials are people just like you and me, and they have all kinds of shenanigans going on at home as well. And so treating them like a human being can go a long way. Being honest and open, transparent, and also understanding that there's a lot of things that they do that you and I don't understand or aren't privileged in knowing. And so there might be other circumstances or things that may be happening in the background. So I think allowing, allowing not only myself, but then also encouraging others to, treat elected officials obviously with respect and appreciation, but knowing that they're people just like you and I are, and their staff can be the best. I actually love all three of my people's staff. I mean, my congressional people are great too, but their staff are like top notch. And those are the people who are, speaking with your senator or representative every day. So being a good resource for them, I feel like that has been the biggest help, is helping other people understand that, if you don't meet with just the senator or the representative, their staff are also can be just as, if not more, helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie Jo. Martell, what about you? Biggest challenge? How did you overcome it?
I think here in Illinois, the challenge has been historically that our representatives do see eye to eye with us. And, a lot of the requests that we want, so initially I got a lot of feedback to say, hey, that we support this, right? In other words, some of the form letters that I would send them, it seemed like junk mail, because It's like we support it. And, this is a little overkill to get, this request. So I think what I started doing was just making my request more specific and educating them to some of the complexities of affordable housing, from our point of view. Things like BABA and certainly funding, certainly, at this moment in time, rents or funding not keeping up with rents and things like that, to have them more informed. And then when I go to Capitol Hill, then I'll give them, FADA's priorities, legislative priorities, and things like that, so that they can look them over. But the specific conversation is, how some of these national complexities are affecting us locally.
So in Oklahoma City, I already told you about the fact that we had done a really poor job advocating for the housing authority. Didn't have conversations with any elected official, national, state, local. And so about 5 or 6 years ago now, it became time for us to begin talking about RAD conversions and development activities that needed city council approval. And so we didn't know them and they didn't know us. And our first foray in front of city council was a disaster because they didn't trust us. They trusted the residents who had complained because the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. And we went through that experience over and over and over again, where city council would explicitly say, because it's the housing authority, we will not approve this ask. And so we decided, with some help from the city's manager and mayor, that we needed to run some Housing Authority 101 sessions. Go in and teach the city council what a housing authority was, how big we were, how many residents we serve, how they are their constituents, and how we're not a poor run organization. And so we did that. We went and we met with them on a regular basis in special meetings to train and to advocate and to explain to the elected official and the staff of the city council and the city staff. And so now, 5 years later, it's a totally different experience because they know us, they understand us, we talk to them on a regular basis. And so now it's pretty common for us to walk in front of city council and get a unanimous vote approving our asks. And so that was our challenge and how we addressed it.
Cool. I just had one follow-up. Sorry, David, I know I'm 52. But one thing that you said, Mark, that really kind of like plugged in for me was, doing a housing 101. I'm curious with the challenges that you all may have faced, and how you were looking to do some of those, those types of things on education. Did you plug into any other systems within, your cities or your jurisdictions, like the education system or the health systems? Like, were there other ways that you made some connections in order to overcome some of your advocacy challenges?
Yeah, we talked with, the health departments, the mental health programs, strong advocacy with the mental health program locally, strong advocacy with the senior care programs locally to help us advocate for programs, to help them advocate for programs to become partners in that situation.
I don't know if anyone else wanted to address Julie's question there. If not, I guess one of the other things that folks must be wondering is, how do you find the time to do advocacy? And I think this time we'll start with Martell.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just like I say, kind of doing this for most of my adult career, it just kind of happens. I think for me, there's never a time where I'd want a board member to kind of ask me if I've interacted with anyone, and I came up with a blank there. So um, just making sure you kind of fit it into my daily routine, to make sure that it's a priority. And the other thing is that kind of knowing that how much of a lag time that some of this can be. In other words, kind of doing this advocacy work and kind of seeing some of the results for your specific ask, whether that might be for a policy or regulatory change, statutory or regulatory change, or specific acts such as, hey, we are going to rehab a school and we think this is great for the community and we'd like your support and maybe some earmarked funds for that. I think it takes persistence, and it takes diligence, and you need to certainly be intentional about it. So just knowing what my priorities are, and kind of being a visionary and a strategic planner, a strategic thinker, then making sure that this work is a priority, and that's kind of how I approach it.
So, I think the first step is to admit to yourself you don't have to do it yourself. You need help advocating. You need your board to help you advocate. That is one of their responsibilities, is to say to elected official, hey, this is a good program. This is a good idea. They have that level of access that maybe you don't have. And then your staff also, for those of you that that work at the larger PHAs, you have staff that can help you write the letters, do the research on the items that need to be discussed. And then you also have to do that yourself. And so I do that through LinkedIn. We'll repost, articles from PHADA, from advocacy organizations that tell stories about public housing, and then other housing authorities that also promote public housing. Martell's really, really good at that, posting stories about what's going on in Elgin and around the world. And so we just kind of, you tag team that. So more people see it. So more people see what's good about public housing in the United States of America and locally also. And then also just remember that PHADA has a tremendous library of advocacy information. It's on their website. If you can't find it, the staff on this call today can really help you, find that, use that. It's very concise. It can go out, in a one page email kind of a thing. And so just remember to do that, and using all those different resources maximizes your time as you go through this.
I would echo Mark's comments there. PHADA's resources have been really helpful. You can review what the trends are, the asks are at the national level or collectively, and then using that to kind of dive into what actually impacts you and your housing authority back home is incredibly helpful. I think it's also helpful to reach out in the moment when you think about them and not putting it off until tomorrow, which then means next week or the next month or never. Even if it's something quick and simple, sometimes when I get an email that makes me think of Senator Hoeven, I will forward it to him right away and say, hey, this made me think of you. See highlighted below. Okay, thanks, love you, bye. And they need to know that you're there and that they're thinking of, or you're thinking of them, because they'll do the same thing in return. When they get updates on appropriations for various funding back home, they'll send me an update and say like, hey, thought you'd want to know. And I'm like, oh, thanks, love you. Like, that's great. That is absolutely beneficial. Also, don't only talk to them when you have an ask. Make sure you say thank you because they are doing a lot of work, especially their staff, and sometimes at not such great pay. And so appreciation goes a long way. And then the last little thing is, Mark also alluded to this, using your partners, whether it's a board member or another housing authority or like-minded agency in the area, to also be reaching out and encouraging partners. We are the experts at housing, and if they don't hear from us, they're going to have all kinds of misconceptions.
Michael, can I step in front of you? I know you're going next, but I did just want to say that to our panelist point that we do have lots of really excellent materials on our website, which they are also included on our webinar resource guide, which has been shared in the chat. But I do just want to make a pitch to you all on the call that if there is something that you would like to have as far as an advocacy document, please reach out to us, because we do our best based on what we hear from you on our one-to-one phone calls, when we also meet with you at our conferences and on these webinars and town halls. But if there's something, if comes to mind that I really wish that, it would be helpful to me when I had these conversations to have some talking points or a one-pager, please let us know and we can quickly create that for you.
Yes, so this has been really great. We're going to move. Our last question is lightning round, and then we will open it up to audience Q&A. So if any of the folks in the audience have a question that you would like to ask our panelists, now is the time. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please do not put it in the chat, although if you put it in the chat, we will find it. Don't worry. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Mark on our lightning round question. So what is one thing, not requiring any preparation, not requiring a heavy lift, that folks in attendance today could do this coming Monday or tomorrow to improve their advocacy work?
So I'd recommend that you, on Monday morning, send an email to the staff at the representative or senator's office or local office or someone to say hi. And just say hi and develop that, as Katie just says, a friendship, a ability to be their colleague for affordable housing. Just send that email. Start the process of getting to know that individual. And then, as Julie said earlier, I think now is the time to schedule your meeting with your representative at DC during the PHADA conference in September. So do that on Monday.
I have more than kind of one thing. Definitely register for the conference, especially if you've never attended, but also prioritize going and doing congressional visits. I promise you, I have never heard of, nor have I experienced, a staffer or a congressperson biting my head off. If you approach them with kindness and respect, they are going to receive that much better than if you go in there harsh and attacking, right? And so that would be my one thing, is go to the conference, do it. Even if it makes you nervous, it's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, I was just trying to unmute myself there. Yeah, Mark kind of stole my thunder. I was going to say the same thing. Really familiarize yourself, with the congressional staff. Because in most of my interaction, whether it's scheduling something or whether it's a specific ask, most of that is being filtered through their staff. There's been times where I've met with their staff rather than meeting with them. And also send follow-ups when you do actually meet with them face to face. But the one big thing that's not a heavy lift that you can do tomorrow, Monday, between now and the conference, familiarize yourself with the congressional staff, local and on Capitol Hill.
Awesome, everyone. Thank you so much. We're going to open up the Q&A. So don't be shy, everybody. Put your questions in. You've got the experts here. But just when you thought it was over, oh, it's not. So one overarching key takeaway, if you want, like, this is the one thing you want everybody who's been listening in to take away from your good advice. What would it be? Katie Jo, I know
Yeah,
you want to start. You're chomping at the bit. I see your mute is off.
it is. I am excited. One of my favorite things to help other people understand is leading with curiosity. So because I'm in a red state, everybody makes assumptions. And let me tell you, do not assume. Assuming makes an ass out of you and me. And just because somebody might have a voting record that you don't care for or agree with, doesn't mean that they can't do different in the future. I think meeting people where they are at and taking an approach of help me understand, what have you learned or experienced? What knowledge do you have about housing authorities and how public housing works? Treating people with dignity and respect goes a long way. And so I would very much so advocate that you need to lead with curiosity.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I'll just say, persistence and, just understanding that, this is, for the long run, developing relationships, even your own approach, how effective you might think you are, in terms of telling your story. Sometimes those things happen over time, you know. So if you send a letter today, and you're consistent, you develop that relationship, and maybe those things, those key points of communication might be more effective a year down the road, a year and a half down the road. A lot of the times, the congressional staff will help you. They'll tell you kind of what might be effective and what pointers they want to hear, or that communication style. Whether they want the bottom line or whether they want the meat and potatoes. So just being persistent and understanding that this is a more of a longer term strategy, and it's not going to happen overnight.
I think what I'd say is tell a story. I've learned that we all want to step in and say, hey, we want, $1 million more for Section 8 vouchers in our local community, and that would be good. But if you told the story from the standpoint of if you approve this allocation amount, a new veteran will have a house tomorrow. Someone will, a family member will be able to, support their child better as they go to school, and then the senior citizen will have housing for an extended period. And so tell a story instead of just making the terse ask, I guess.
I like that one, Mark. My mom was an English teacher and my dad was in sales. So the art of telling a story goes a long way for sure.
Julie, can I add on to Mark's question really quick?
Yeah.
And this is just kind of, I think, a strategy that we use here at PHADA, which is congressional staff really don't care that your job is hard. And so I think whenever you're in doubt, lead with the residents. Lead with the resident impact. Don't lead with how hard your job is. The resident should be in like every sentence that you use. A subject, a verb, and resident. Okay, that's all I had to say.
Great add-on. Thanks, Michael. So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to actually start with John's and then I'll get back to yours, Mindy. So John's question is for the panelists. Are there different strategies dealing with district offices versus DC staff? And I do want to say that I wrote that question down too, but
Well, I would say for me, yeah, I'm with the local office, it's more, I'm looking for them more on recess and things like that. And what's going on locally. When might your representative or senator be local, and how can we support their efforts, and things like that, so and versus the DC office, then, I'm talking more specifically about, my visit to Capitol Hill and things like that. And what I found is that, over time, they'll tell me, hey, contact the local office for this, or contact the district office for, other reasons and things like that. So, and there's some, there's some movement on their staff sometimes. There's new people and things like that. Your name doesn't always get privileged enough to get passed on. There's some reintroduction that needs to occur from time to time. But again, more my strategy is, if it is a strategy at all, it's dealing with, what might their schedule be on recess. If we have anything locally that, we might need them to attend a ribbon cutting, or, a bus tour of our properties, things like that. And, the other thing too is that sometimes when our community partners have things going on in the community, a ribbon cutting or a check presentation, I try to be there to support them as well. So just kind of knowing and understanding what their schedule is away from Capitol Hill. That'll be my strategy.
I've always treated them pretty much the same. I mean, I give them the same information. Yes, the local office is more accessible, especially for, the three of us that are speaking to you today that live in the Midwest part of the United States. We can't just jump over to DC easily, and so it's they're the first line of contact for me, and then the national office, the DC office, they are the contact if I really need them to push a particular piece of legislation. I will email them and visit with them, because they have access to, the other staff, that the other congressional staff, and then the other departmental staff.
And just to build on Mark's point, it is my understanding that if every time that you visit your local district office, they are sending those your information and also the topics up to the DC office. So even if you're not actually having meetings as often with the DC office, they are seeing that you are stopping into the office, that you have concerns around a variety of different topics, which can be really helpful. So they recognize your name when you come into DC. And then also, if a bill crosses their desk that possibly is on those topics as well, they may not sign on immediately, but at least their ears will perk up and potentially communicate with you that they have questions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add also that sort of how you are a resource for those offices may be a little different. For the DC office, it may be more focused around legislation, but the local office may be able to utilize you as a resource in their constituent services. So if they get calls from tenants, or they get calls from people complaining about local landlords, instead of just responding, they can contact you to get more information about what's really going on. And that can really help to build the relationship for those other situations.
I think I'll just add on to what David said as well. I think connecting the dots with the work that PHADA does here in Washington, we often act as a resource to many offices here as well. So just so you're aware, we have offices that reach out to us quite often as well for specifics, or for analysis, or for feedback on what our general membership might be interested in. Before we sign off there, Mindy had asked a question: is PHADA setting up specific visits during the conference so we don't duplicate? So we are not, but I believe we are working to coordinate, but I will let the coordinators on the call speak more specifically.
So I think, Mindy, so as Crystal mentioned, I believe at the beginning, we are having a kind of a follow-up advocacy webinar, I believe on August 25th. Don't quote me on that. Crystal's giving me a thumbs up, which is always good when she says my paycheck is in the mail too. So that advocacy webinar on August 25th, that we're really not planning any agenda for that webinar. It's really just going to be office hours for people to come in and ask any questions. And we're also hoping that folks who have scheduled meetings will come in and participate and potentially think about going together, whether they've scheduled meetings or maybe they haven't scheduled meetings. Given the timing, August 25th, you should still have time to potentially get a meeting scheduled after then. So if we do have, for instance, folks from Texas coming in to join, maybe we could pair up folks and see who wants to go over. I mean, I think some of these meetings, you don't want to take an entourage over there because if you get a 30-minute meeting, it takes 30 minutes to get through introductions. But I think sometimes there is strength in numbers if the number is less than 5. So really, that's what we're targeting that August 25th webinar to entail.
All right, I think I'm up. So just a reminder about our legislative forum, again, which is scheduled for September 13th through the 15th here in DC. It gets to our office hours webinar coming up on August 25th. That will be the afternoon of August 25th on Eastern Standard Time. So you should receive both the recording for this and likely the date and time of the next more informal webinar next week. And so throughout that webinar would be a really great opportunity. Ask questions. Maybe you've initiated the process to get your meeting scheduled and you just have some questions for us or want to chat about some things. Also, what Michael mentioned about maybe going with a buddy, perhaps someone who has done this before, or even if there's just a few of you that want to do it together and it's your first visit. We're really working not just here in this webinar today and then the next one next month, but also in DC, creating opportunities for you to network and share tips and tricks with your peers very informally. So we'd love to see you at the next webinar, August 25th and or September 13th through 15th at our legislative forum in DC. And I wanted to just thank again, Mark, Martell, and Katie Jo. Thank you so much. This was really insightful for me as well, and I hope for the rest of our participants. And I'm going to kick it off to Sarah just for some final closing logistics.
Thank you, Crystal. It was a pleasure to have all of you join us today, and thank you again to our panelists for sharing all of their knowledge and experiences. If there's anything we didn't cover here today or specific questions you have, please be sure to reach out to policy@phada.org, and our team here will be in touch with you right away. Our legislative forum registration is open. Hotel rooms are going quickly, so we encourage you to make those arrangements soon. And you, just following the webinar, you'll be receiving a 1-minute survey about the webinar. We'd sincerely appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.